2021 brought us plenty of bikes, from million rand sport bikes to affordable adventure models and everything in between. Ridden in some amazing locations in Africa and Europe, this was our pandemic-afflicted year on the bike show. Please join me as I discuss what was a challenging year in many ways with my previously young and soon-to-be middle-aged colleague Donovan Faree. And I'm going to kick things off with a couple of bikes that were genuine surprises to me in 2021. The first of which is BMW's S1000R, and the surprise wasn't really a good one. As we all know, the last couple of years has seen an explosion of naked sport bikes, some of them so radical that they're now called super nakeds. I was very much looking forward to riding BMW's latest version of the S1000R, its own interpretation of the super naked theme. I've owned one in the past and loved its mix of great performance and relative practicality, and I was even a fan of its quirky looks. The updated model, although undoubtedly quantifiably an improvement, left me a little cold, a little disappointed if I'm honest. Its performance and electronics were already good, and they've only moved on by a relatively modest margin. In a world of insane naked performance bikes where 180 horsepower doesn't even raise an eyebrow, 165 for the BMW, I think it was a bit too sensible for a flagship naked bike, especially for a manufacturer that we know can build fantastic engines. And then there's the looks, which are, well, they're ordinary, anonymous, far from memorable, which wasn't something you could say about the previous generation. But another of their naked bikes surprised me in a much more pleasant way this year. The R1250R, the boxer-engined naked bike that most people, me included, don't even consider in a world where there's so many options if you want something naked, fast, stuffed with technology and featuring an interesting engine configuration. Don't overlook this model. For me, it makes a more entertaining road bike than the S1000. Just as much technology. I love the way you can adjust the suspension and riding modes so easily on the top version and tailor them to suit the conditions or even your mood. If you want soft suspension for a rough road, but still want the most aggressive throttle response because you're in the mood for a mad blast, no problem. And although it's only 136 horsepower, you do have the rather significant matter of 143 newton meters of torque next to the S1000's 112 newton meters. Massive horsepower is undoubtedly, briefly, terrifyingly fun in the right environment, but huge torque is fun everywhere, all of the time. Anyway, Don, sorry about that, got a bit carried away there. Did anything surprise you in a good way this year?
Well, okay, I'm going to actually use your example right here. The BMW Big Tourers, they've got I've always loved the K1600S. I've always thought, why would you want anything else? Why does anybody even bother making anything else? It's big 6-cylinder, it's magnificent. Then early on this year, we went down to George and I rode the R1250 RT. And it's also similar to, your R1200, old 1250R. It's a bike you kind of overlook, you know what I mean? It's not really all that important. But I just remember we were in the rain on this twisty road. And at the time I said I sort of forgot about it, which is actually a compliment in a way, because we were riding in the pouring rain, twisty roads, big touring bike. The last thing you should be doing traditionally is forgetting about it because you should be kind of terrified, you know what I mean? I kind of quietly noticed a little grin, in my helmet, and we were having such a great time. The thing handled so well, that beautiful boxer twin motor. Oh, it's just absolutely magnificent. I've had a few friends of mine said they have a 1200 GS, and should they bother with a 1250? My answer's always yes. Just 1200 is not good enough. Go get a 12, or just ride one. It'll be the most expensive test ride you've ever had. That 1250 motor is spectacular, and this is me who's always been a bit critical of the the BMW boxer motors recently. So hey, I put my hands up. Well done, BMW.
Yeah. A good year for the boxer engines then, and a great year for adventure bikes. KTM's new hardcore 1290R Super Adventure is the one to go for if you're Chris Birch or Alfie Cox or perhaps a Danilo Petrucci kind of rider, but I want to concentrate on two adventure models that can still handle off-road but remain uncannily brilliant on the road as well. First is the KTM Super Adventure S that I rode to the source of my local river, the Allier here in France. Simply brilliant. An amazing chassis that made carving through mountain passes in this part of the world so enjoyable that at no point did I ever wish I was on a supposedly sportier road bike. And the engine, 1.3 litres of V-twin with 160 horsepower and 140 newton meters of torque, and now with added smoothness. Simply epic. And it came with radar and adaptive cruise control that proved to be surprisingly useful. Quite simply, I fell in love with this bike. I couldn't ever see the need for any other kind of bike in my garage. Until later in the year when I rode Ducati's Multistrada V4 with 175 horsepower and 125 newton meters of torque. I think I loved this bike even more. Its engine is equally brilliant, but in a slightly different, revvier way, and its chassis is as impressive, though also in a slightly more graceful, long-legged way. And it also has adaptive cruise control, but with added blind spot detection, which is also surprisingly useful. I would be genuinely content with either bike. They're both stunningly capable adventure touring bikes that are more than happy to play at being a comfortable, fast sport bike on the road if that's what you want. And that is actually what I want out of a bike these days. Don, I know you like your tech stuff. These bikes must be right up your alley.
You mentioned also you like the KTM Super Adventure S. And you remember that, just a highlight of my mind, we did that lap of Midval where I followed Dave Griffin. Now, following Dave Griffin is never a good idea at any time. I was following Dave Griffin without using the throttle or the brakes at all, just using this adaptive cruise control that the Super Adventure first introduced into motorcycling. And I did a whole lap following Dave and not crashing, which, you know, quite frankly, I think is miraculous, and it's just a sign of the times. I mean, well done, you know what I mean? Something else I want to talk about is a bike I rode quite recently. It's the Husqvarna Norden, the 901. And you know what? Earlier on in this year, I rode the two 890s Adventure, the KTM version of those. You know, the normal one's got lower suspension. The R has got the big raised up suspension. The Norden has the same motor, same frame, similar suspension. Just it's got the suspension travel sort of between the base Adventure and the R Adventure. And apart from that, it's just really looks and styling. And yet somehow, you know, and I know, I'm pretty sure, and I probably should do this actually, if I took an 890 Adventure and a Norden, line them up together, I'd probably find that they feel almost the same. And yet there's something about that Norden, and it must be psychological. There's something about that Norden that just makes it feel somehow so much better. And you can't explain why. It's just when you're on that thing, you get this lovely little feeling, you know, in your stomach, and you want to open the throttle more and you want to kind of go Dakar. And they keep saying it's, oh no, it's a comfortable tourer and all this and that. And yet it looks like an old school Dakar rally bike, and I want to PTO Hansel the whole flipping thing, you know, the whole time. And yeah, that was an absolute joy for me, that Norden.
Okay, understandably, there's been a lot of tech in the bikes we've mentioned so far, but I want to just mention a model that, although not actually new for 2021, is actually something I rode for the first time of this past year. Husqvarna's 701 SM reminded me that at a time when everything seems to come absolutely dripping in new technology, this passion of ours, biking, is actually, it's a pretty simple affair. All you really need is an engine and a couple of wheels held together with a few bits of steel tubing, some bouncy bits at each end, and a seat and a handlebar to control a relatively modest power output, and you're set to have a blast. The Husky gives you about 70 horsepower, lots of well-controlled suspension travel, a bit of traction control and ABS, and lets you get on with it. It's a package that you can absolutely wring the neck of, properly thrash it, and feel like you're taking the bike closer to its limits than you can with any of the other high horsepower, high tech bikes that we've mentioned so far. And that's a truly refreshing rewarding way to experience motorcycling. Sure, it's not a practical option as your only bike, but as a second bike, it's basically perfect. Don, you understand what I'm getting at here, don't you?
Okay, two things. First of all, yeah, I totally agree with you. A bike that did that for me, where it's not riding you, you're riding it, and it's so much fun. Aprilia RS 660. Yeah, I mean, this is a class where, I mean, I can't even put it in the same class. It's got the same capacity as all the other 650, 660, 700s. It's not in the same class. It's a different motorcycle. It's a different price bracket, first of all, completely. But it has all the technological marvels of a big, proper, expensive superbike, but with a 660 motor. So, you know, you've got all that fun stuff and you can ride it hard. I mean, really hard. You can whack that throttle open and it is such a joy. You're not doing the lap times of an RSV4, but you don't care. Who cares? You are having so much fun. Then on the opposite end of the spectrum, another bike I rode, one I've also been very skeptical about. This seems to be, you know, the Donovan gets proven wrong show. New Honda NC 750. Where you look at it and you think, oh, you know, one of these again. Okay, I'll ride it. I'll give it a go. And then after a while, you're going, hey, you know, look at that. That's kind of right. It looks much better. It feels much better. It's got so much more personality, and it's got all that grown-up, responsible stuff that it's famous for. So, well done, Honda.
I told you, my young colleague is getting closer to middle age. He's beginning to appreciate bikes with less than 1 trillion horsepower. Shocking stuff. Almost as shocking as the last bike I want to mention, a bike that shocked me with quite how often I found myself smiling, grinning, and on more than one occasion actually singing inside my helmet. BMW's R18 is a bike I hadn't ridden until a few months ago because Don attended the original launch and then I went on the launch of the bagger version. Let me be clear though, this is not a type of bike I would ever spend my own money on, but I can appreciate the charms of touring cruisers. In fact, a couple of the best touring holidays I've shared with my wife have been on Harley-Davidson's pannier-laden cruisers. Well, the bagger version of the R18 is aimed squarely at stealing sales from the American icon. And from what I experienced, it deserves to do so. It's big, it's shiny, it's a bit silly, but it's stuffed with technology, including, if I remember correctly, a Rolls-Royce inspired and totally pointless and totally silly power in reserve dial. And it's got an epic stereo, and I couldn't believe quite how entertaining the bike was down a twisting back road, though I totally expected it to be as relaxing and effortless as it was on the highway. Contrary to my expectations, I really enjoyed my relatively brief excursion on BMW's Bagger Boxer. Don, you rode Harley's similar excursion into BMW territory this year, didn't you?
Yeah, the HarleyDavidson Pan America, the first ever Harley-Davidson adventure bike. And, you know, when it was announced, we thought, oh hell, what is this? You know, what are they thinking? Honestly, who's going to buy one of these things? And then, annoyingly, proving us wrong again, this is the bike show's wrong show. It was damn good. It was really, really good motor, good suspension, good everything is sort of set up. You know, one or two little problems, but overall, I mean, we had it on the show with the KTM 1290 Super Adventure. We also had it together with the 1250 GS, and you know what? It was there. I can't say that it, you know, wow, the others are miles ahead. This is a good show and all of that. It was there. A guy buying a Pan America is not going to be disappointed lining up next to GS's or KTM's. And this is Harley-Davidson's first go at an adventure bike. And it honestly, with the reputation Harley-Davidson has for being a little bit kind of stuck in the 1940s, it's amazing what they put together on a first go. And I look forward to seeing where they're going to go with this.
Yeah, undoubtedly lots to look forward to this year in the world of motorcycling, and you can rest assured that we will do our very best to keep you up to date with whatever is happening. And remember, you can catch any of these and all of these tests that we've done during the past year on our YouTube channel, so please feel free to go over there and check out what is really now a very large library of tests indeed. Time now though for some commercials.